You are walking through a crowded room. Suddenly, your eyes rest on a specific book, a specific person, or perhaps a specific idea that you cannot seem to shake. Most of us call this interest. We treat it as a fleeting preference or a random quirk of personality. But have you ever noticed how these pulls feel remarkably physical? It is as if a silent thread is tethering you to a destination you haven't visited yet. We are taught to prioritize logic and to ignore these quiet impulses in favor of a practical plan. Yet the friction in our lives often begins the moment we stop listening to that internal gravity. There is a hidden mechanism behind your curiosity. It is not a distraction. It is a sophisticated navigation system. We have all experienced those days where life seems to cooperate with us. Doors open before we even knock. The right person calls at the exact moment we think of them. In these moments, effort feels secondary to a sense of natural momentum. But then the atmosphere shifts. Suddenly, every task feels like a struggle. You find yourself pushing against a world that seems to be pushing back. We usually write these cycles off as luck or timing. However, something strange happens when you look closer at these patterns. You may notice that the flow often begins with a small, curious impulse you chose to follow. Conversely, the friction often starts when you dismiss an internal nudge because it didn't seem logical. This suggests that these feelings are not just random moods, they are feedback. We often overlook the fact that our environment is responding to a signal we are emitting. Why do these shifts in reality happen so suddenly? To understand this, we have to look at the hidden architecture behind your preferences. Watch closely, because the mechanism behind this is far simpler than most people imagine. Consider the moments when your life feels like a series of fortunate events. You decide to take a different route home and stumble upon exactly what you've been searching for. You mention a project to a stranger, and they happen to have the perfect solution. Most people label these instances as luck or a good day. But have you ever noticed how these moments often cluster together? When you are in that state, the world seems to rearrange itself to accommodate you. Then the opposite pattern emerges. You try to force a result through sheer willpower, yet every door remains locked. The phone doesn't ring. The technology breaks. The timing is off. We often dismiss this as bad luck, ignoring the strange consistency behind it. This is where the pattern becomes clear. The flow is not random, and the friction is not an accident. If you look back, you may see that these cycles often mirror your own internal state of interest or dread. The repetition suggests something deeper than coincidence. It hints that you are not just living in a world, but interacting with a responsive system. We usually overlook this pattern because it hides in plain sight, masquerading as the chaos of daily life. This is where the experience begins to make sense. We have been taught to view attraction as a mere preference, a random spark of interest or a personality trait. But what if we have misunderstood its entire function? In this framework, that pull you feel toward a specific idea or activity is not just an emotion. It is a communication. It is the physical translation of your resonance with a particular path. Think of it as a signal, a frequency match between who you are and a potential version of your future. When you feel that sudden surge of excitement, you are essentially picking up a transmission from a version of yourself that is already living that experience. This reveals something important about how reality works. The universe does not speak in words, it speaks in vibrations of interest. We often overlook this because the signal feels so ordinary, so personal. We assume it is just us being curious. But in reality, that curiosity is the compass. It is the sophisticated guidance system we noted earlier, showing you the path of least resistance. You are not just liking something, you are being magnetically drawn toward your next logical step. This is the hidden rule behind the experience. To understand why the flow appears and disappears, you must view your consciousness as a radio receiver. The version of reality where you are successful, creative, and at peace is already broadcasting on a specific frequency. When you feel a pull towards something, you are simply tuning your dial to match that broadcast. This explains why the pattern behaves this way. Think of your life as a television set with infinite channels playing simultaneously. When you follow your excitement, you are not creating a new reality. You are simply changing the channel to a version that already exists. This is why the flow vanishes the moment we ignore the signal. By choosing a path based on fear or obligation, you effectively turn the dial away from your resonance. The mechanism is binary. You are either in alignment with the frequency of your true self, or you are out of it. When you are in tune, the broadcast of that reality includes the people, coincidences, and opportunities that match that state. This reveals the rule behind the experience. Reality does not happen to you. It is reflected to you based on the frequency you occupy. This mechanism has been operating in your life the entire time, quietly guiding every ordinary decision you have ever made. Suddenly, the shift from effort to ease begins to make sense. It is not about working harder, it is about staying tuned to the right signal. If the mechanism is so simple, why do we find it so difficult to trust? This is where many of us lose the signal. We have been conditioned to believe that life must be a series of calculated risks and logical steps. We equate safety with predictability. When a surge of excitement arrives, the inner voice begins to argue almost immediately. It tells us that the pull we feel is unrealistic or irresponsible. This is the moment excitement gets replaced by caution. We often mistake this resistance for wisdom or maturity, believing that fear is simply a form of intelligence. But every time you silence the signal in favor of what you think you should do, you introduce friction into the system. You are essentially trying to navigate a new reality using an old map that no longer fits. This internal conflict creates a static that drowns out the very frequency you are trying to reach. How many times has caution silenced your own signal of excitement? If you have noticed yourself doing this, I invite you to share that moment of reflection in the comments. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward clearing the path for a new kind of momentum. Despite the static of fear, there is a simple method to begin testing this mechanism for yourself. Think of it as a navigation process rather than a list of rigid instructions. The formula begins by noticing the options available to you right now. Out of all the things you could do, which one contains even a tiny bit more excitement than the others? This is where navigation begins. Your only task is to act on that excitement to the very best of your ability. Follow the signal as far as it naturally leads, without forcing a specific result. This is how the signal becomes action. The key is to release any attachment to what the outcome should look like. This allows the mechanism to lead you to the next logical step without the friction of your expectations. This process works best when followed with a sense of light-hearted curiosity rather than pressure. You are simply exploring where the frequency leads. By repeating this simple loop, you begin to stay in alignment with the version of yourself that is already in flow. This is where the shift in experience starts. If this perspective resonates with you, consider subscribing for more explorations like this. If these ideas helped you see your own patterns differently, leave a like so more people can discover this journey. The shift rarely starts with something dramatic. It usually appears in the quiet spaces of a normal afternoon. Imagine you are working on a routine task when a sudden, small curiosity about a topic you haven't researched in years crosses your mind. Instead of dismissing it as a distraction, you decide to follow that thread for 10 minutes. This small action is the first step of the formula. While looking into that topic, you come across a name or a concept that perfectly solves a problem you've been struggling with at work.
Later that day, you mention this discovery to a friend who reveals they happen to be starting a project in that exact field. This is often how the shift begins. A chain reaction is set off by a single, simple decision to honor a small impulse. Have you ever followed a minor curiosity that led somewhere entirely unexpected? You may have already experienced similar moments and dismissed them as mere coincidence. But when you look closer, you see the mechanism at work. The signal appeared, you acted without attachment, and reality rearranged itself to meet your new frequency. These synchronicities are not random rewards. They are the natural ripples created when you choose to move with your own internal gravity. This suggests something remarkable about the nature of reality. We have spent our lives viewing the world as a solid, fixed environment that we must navigate through effort and planning. But suddenly, the pattern reveals a deeper meaning. If your excitement is a literal frequency match, then reality may be far more flexible than it appears. This changes the way we understand the experience of choice. It implies that the life you desire is not something you have to build from scratch, but a version of reality that already exists as a potential frequency. Your internal signal is simply the bridge between where you are and where that version of you resides. Could these signals be guiding us toward versions of ourselves we have not yet explored?
This shifts the goal from making things happen to allowing things to manifest through alignment. You may already be standing at the threshold of this realization in your own life, noticing that the more you trust the signal, the more the world seems to reorganize itself around your presence. This is the deeper revelation. You are not a passenger in a random universe. You are an active participant in a responsive field of infinite possibilities. Perhaps the signal has been there all along, waiting for the moment you were quiet enough to hear it. The pattern of flow and resistance is not a distant concept. It is something you can begin to observe in the very next choice you make. Sometimes the shift begins simply by noticing which impulses you have been suppressing in favor of habit. As you move through your day, you may notice something new, a subtle curiosity or a sudden alignment that you previously would have dismissed as chance. The journey of awareness does not require a dramatic leap, only a willingness to trust the internal gravity that has always been guiding you. How might your experience change if you began listening to that pull with the same seriousness you give to logic? If this exploration has opened a new perspective, the next chapter of this journey reveals how these signals specifically interact with your belief systems to shape the physical world around you.